Well, hi, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. Thank you to Jeremiah Long, our producer and engineer, to Vincent Turner, our co host and founder. I'm Harper LaBelle, and we want to thank you for tuning in to our Legends edition. Today, we're going to talk about one of the greats. And the reason he's great for me is because he has encompassed everything you can in football. He's been a player, he's been a coach, he's been an administrator, he has been a vice president, a scout, you name it. Doug Williams has been a part of it. What a guy. He loves the game of football. And even after his pro career was over, he wanted to stay in the sport, in the business. And what an example he has been for so many. And Vincent, when I get to first read about Doug Williams and his accomplishments, we obviously think about the Super Bowl, but for me, it went well beyond what his pro career was. And obviously, as I mentioned, his career after his playing days were over and his ability to connect with his old school and to help football grow in general has certainly made a positive impression on me. What about you?
I mean, when you think about Doug Williams, he's a pallbearer for all the African-American quarterbacks that's in the league right now. And when he won the Super Bowl, that changed a lot from the game, from the perspective, from their position. But most of all, I'm going to be honest with you, on that great day of January the 31st, 1988, and seeing him go down in the first quarter, we all thought, well, man, he's not going to be able to make it. The injury looked serious. I thought he had tore his knee. Then he comes out in the second quarter, and all I can think about is players that I've seen play their position from an African-American perspective. Because, see, people got to understand, I saw the great Eldridge Dickey at 6 years old play at Tennessee State. I saw Joe Gilliam play in the 70s at Tennessee State. I mean, I'm a kid there. Then I got to see Reggie Collier at Southern Miss. And I think about this time now. If we was in this era, all those gentlemen right there would have been playing at a high level right now in the National Football League. But when you look at Doug Williams, he set the tone, and it made me proud. It made me proud to see an African-American perform high level at their position on the biggest stage. And then, of course, his thing at Grambling. That was special. Back to you, Hawk.
Well, let's take a look. How did he get to where he got? Born in Zachary, Louisiana on August 9th, 1955, Doug Williams was the sixth of eight children. He was born to his father, Robert, and his mother, Laura. He was a young kid who enjoyed running around and having a good time, and sports became a part of his early life. His high school days, he went to Cheneyville High School in Zachary, Louisiana. And for obvious reasons, when you're 6'4", the basketball coach wants you, but the football coach did as well. So he was a two-sport letterman. In his senior year, he threw for 1,180 yards. He had 22 touchdowns that year, but he really didn't get recruited very heavily. There weren't a whole lot of eyes that thought that this young man, the quarterback, the 6'4", 220-pounder, he was probably about 205 back during his senior year. But not a lot of folks ended up seeing or being interested in signing him. But he did catch the eye of a young coach from Grambling named Eddie Robinson. What a difference that made for him in his life. He got recruited to go to Grambling, and he ended up going. His first year, he redshirted, and he didn't get to start till 1974. And Vincent, his career at Grambling, obviously things took off. What a great time that he had while he was there, and it excelled as a quarterback.
Well, if you go back on April the 3rd, 2007, that's the day that Mr. Eddie Robinson died. And I think about what Doug Williams said, came out in the media, and Doug Williams had tears coming down his face. And he said, you know what? I owe everything to Coach Rob. That's what they call him at Grambling. But I think about Eddie Robinson, and it's good that you brought up that he was recruited by a young man by the name of Eddie Robinson. Eddie Robinson said that Doug Williams, this one who's at Grambling, he just got more than just talent. He's a natural leader, real student of the game. Coaching him was a blessing from God, and he was the American dream. And Grambling was 36-7 in Doug Williams' years of starting at Grambling State University. But I take from all the great players that was with him during that time, from Sammy White, the Gary Big Hands Johnson, to a young Everson Walls that was a freshman on that Grambling team where Doug Williams was a senior. And then I remember Doug Williams was my senior year in high school. Grambling comes up to play Tennessee State. Tennessee State got a quarterback named Joe 747 Adams, who got drafted by the 49ers in the 81 draft. And I didn't go to the game, but I got word from the neighborhood. I didn't want to mention the 901, but they said, man, I'm telling you, Tennessee State won that game 26-8. But I'm telling you, that guy on the center, boy, his arm, the ball is like whisp, whisp, whisp. And that's when I heard of Doug Williams. That's when I started following him. And that's when the story comes from Grambling. But think about this, Harper. You know, Bob Hope, and you know what I'm talking about, Harp, during Christmas time, one of our favorite things we like to do is watch the Bob Hope Christmas special because he had the AP All-American team being over grandmama's house, over uncle's house, over the LaBelle's house, or the Turner houses. Bob Hope had all the first team, 11 on defense, 11 on offense. And a lot of people don't know that. Don't you know Doug Williams was the first team quarterback on the team that had Earl Campbell, Ken McAfee, Jerry Robinson, a Division II school? He was the first team all AP quarterback that year. That's special playing at Grambling State. Back to you, Hawk.
Well, Vincent, he was fourth in the Heisman Trophy his senior year. Earl Campbell ended up winning it. Terry Miller was second. Ken McAfee, who you just mentioned, a tight end from Notre Dame, was third. And Doug had 3,286 yards. He had 38 touchdowns versus only 18 interceptions that year. So no wonder. But a young black quarterback in the NFL didn't quite fit yet, except for him catching the eye of a young assistant coach with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And that guy is Joe Gibbs. And Joe ended up working out Doug for a couple of days, highly unusual for back in those days. But he spent a second day working him out, going over playbook things, putting scenarios together, and watching him throw. And Joe said afterwards, there isn't a throw that this guy can make, and he's a born leader. You mentioned that they were 36-7, SWAC champions a couple of years there while Doug Williams was under center. Obviously, the success that he had in Grambling, could that transfer over into the National Football League? Well, it certainly did for Doug. He ended up getting drafted by the by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and what a difference he made while he was there. The picture in the upper left-hand corner of your screen, folks, that's him handing off to Ricky Bell. And Tampa Bay was terrible back in those days. If you remember, folks, they didn't win a game their first year. They were 0-14. They were 0-12 their second year. Going into the last two games, they ended up beating the St. Louis Cardinals and winning their last game of the year. So they end up winning two games, and they were 2-12 that second year. And then they draft Doug Williams. His first year was a little bit rocky with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but things started to change very quickly in Tampa with a defensive expertise and guys like the Selman brothers and Richard Wood. They ended up turning it around pretty quickly. But talk a little bit about the draft process, Joe Gibbs, and obviously his selection and becoming a part of Tampa Bay.
First and foremost, I want to give special kudos and love to Mr. Ken Hurrock, who was on our show earlier, who's the GM with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, to head coach John McKay out of USC. This for you, Mr. Travers. And, of course, to Mr. Joe Gibbs for having the courage, having the ability to draft a quarterback overall number one that was an African-American quarterback. And if you remember, when we had Mr. Hurrock on the show, Hawk, he talked about how intense it was in Tampa at that time. I don't have to say anything. Here at 100 Yards of Football, we always say facts, like the great Ronnie Keebler. Doug, first 5 seasons with Tampa, they went to the playoffs 3 times. They played in the 1979 NFC Championship game. Their first 5 seasons under Doug Williams, they went to the playoffs 3 times. In 76, they went 0-14, I believe. Think about that. And then they draft this young man out of a black school the SWAC, #1 overall. But what I want to really say about Doug Williams, my respect goes higher for him. He decided to set out, got into a contract dispute with the owner. I don't want to throw his name out there, and I'm not going to say his name this morning. Doug was the 12th paid quarterback in the league at that time. And he only wanted what was his market value. Of course, it didn't end well with Tampa Bay. But during the year that he set out, his first wife died. And he had to raise a daughter by himself. Think about that. Then he had to go to the USFL to get what he thought was suspect to him being one of the top quarterbacks in pro football. Things didn't work out in the USFL. But again, I want to give love and respect to Joe Gibbs. He had the honor to call Doug back. Hey, you still want to play football? Come on up here in Washington. I'd like to have you as a backup. But Joe Gibbs knew what he was doing. Let's be honest. Jay Schrader was struggling. Washington had a Super Bowl team. The rest is history. Back to you, Harper.
Well, one of the things that certainly impressed me was the difference that Doug had when he threw a ball. A lot of guys will they'll hold the ball by their ear and they'll release it there. He had a baseball release. It was really high, and the way that he followed through, he'd lift his back leg up off the ground. It was almost like he was a pitcher. At least it looked that way to me. But I never saw Doug Williams throw anything but a spiral, a tight spiral. There are times where I would watch Peyton Manning, for example, and no disrespect to Peyton, but he couldn't throw anything even close. There would always be a wobble in his ball, but nothing but a tight spiral for Doug. So obviously his career in Tampa and his ability to get the ball down the field, his first pass when he got to play in an exhibition game there for the Buccaneers, it was the ball was in the air for 75 yards. It was an incompletion, but he got a standing ovation because guys like Spurrier and Mike Ray and any of the other quarterbacks that Tampa had during those first couple of years, they couldn't throw like that. They didn't have the arm strength. And so Doug made a very serious impression. And obviously the team, when he got there, wasn't very good. 78, they were 4-6. They ended up in 79 going 10-6. And that was the difference maker. Doug was in the championship scene, even though the offense struggled that day. They end up losing 9-0 to the Rams, and the Rams win that game, the NFC Championship. They go to play the Steelers, but Doug Williams had arrived. 1980, they were 5-10. They go 9-7. You said they went to the playoffs 3 times while he was there. 82 was a strike short year. They were 5-4. And then in a contract dispute, as you mentioned, Vincent, things got a little bit tough. He went to the USFL for a couple of years, but obviously things in Washington turned around. His relationship, you never know. You never know who you're going to be working with again. And that's one of the reasons, folks, if you ever hear somebody who has a clear shot to say something bad against their team, against their coach, or against the general manager of the front office, you usually keep your mouth shut because you never know what type of door might be open later on in your career or in spite of whatever happens. But getting reunited with the Redskins, obviously what a difference maker that was. And Doug ends up being a starter in the Super Bowl. The picture in the bottom left-hand corner, folks, that you're looking at, that's when Doug went down. It looked like he had torn his knee to shreds. And I certainly thought, it's over. Vincent, I don't know if you thought the same thing, but he's not going to be able to play. But what a turnaround in that Super Bowl for him to be able to throw all the touchdowns, the first being an 80-yarder to Ricky Sanders after he returned back into the ballgame.
That year, 87, was a strike-shortened season. One of the most unusual seasons in the National Football League that year. I was a 27-year-old living in Loudon, Tennessee, watching the game with, at that time, some ex-brother-in-laws, Danny Kerr and Darwin Kerr. Love to you today. That Washington Redskins team was very special, man. Not on the reason because they had Doug Williams at quarterback. They had some players that I knew personally on that team. But I'm going to start with Doug's performance. That second quarter might have been one of the best quarters ever in Super Bowl history of any player. 80 yards to Ricky Sanders, 50 yards to Gary Clark, Another touchdown to Ricky Sanders. Another touchdown to Clint Dittmer.
Didier. Yep.
Excuse
Yep.
me. Thank you.
No problem.
We always say the ball didn't hit the ground. It was special. And then the Washington Redskins team, the characters that made up that team. Think about how the offensive line had to respect Doug Williams to accept him as a starter. I give kudos to them. Riley McKenzie, Mark May, Joe Jacoby, Jeff Bostic, Russ Graham. Thank you. Because Dre Strader was their man during the season. I'm sorry. But think about the respect. And then the defensive side of the ball. Dexter Manley, Charles Mann, Darrell Green, and the young man that had 2 interceptions in that game. I went to middle school with his brother, Kevin Wilburn, Barry Wilburn from the 901, Orange Mound. Father, Jesse Wilburn, one of the greatest football players in Tennessee State history. And seeing him pick off 2 passes in the Super Bowl, I thought I was seeing something in a movie. How can you not be proud of that team? And then Doug setting the tone for all the other African-American quarterbacks that got really not treated right. From Joe Gilliam Jr. to Marlon Briscoe, to James Shack Harris, to Charlie Brackens, to Warren Moon, Joe Literally, my man Eldridge Dickey, Vince Evans, Parnell Dickerson, and Reggie Collier. And when he was able to complete that game, all I can see was the Redskins doing the cabbage patch. And I was just proud. It was special, man. It was that special. And then Eddie Robertson, his coach, said after the game, we like to think we can dream the American dream. My baby. He didn't say his boy, his quarterback. My baby. Doug Williams has completed the American dream. Back to you, Harper.
Well, there's a lot of pain that he went through both during and prior to that Super Bowl. The day before, he had a root canal. So he was still all swollen up, could probably barely talk at all. And I know that during the interview process the week before, one of the reporters had said, so how long have you been a black quarterback? Sometimes reporters have no idea what they're doing. But he said, well, I've been a quarterback since high school, and I've been black all my life. So he had a little bit of fun and some amusement during some of the stupid things that people say during the Super Bowl interviewing process on media day. But again, having a root canal the day before, and he ends up breaking a record, 331 yards in the Super Bowl. And every ball that he threw was right on the money, wasn't it? I mean, the one to Ricky Sanders, Ricky didn't break stride at all, at least on the first one. And then you mentioned the posse, right? The Gary Clark, and then Art Monk, and Didier, and all the other guys that were a part, Frank Warren that was a part of that team. The ball was right in their hands. And all he had to do was catch it. You mentioned the ball did not touch the ground. So he breaks a record. He's the Super Bowl MVP. What a game. And he comes back the next year, and he's ready to do it all over again. But he suffered from some injuries, and Mark Rippon ended up being a starting quarterback for the Redskins when they win their next Super Bowl. So 3 different championships with 3 different starting quarterbacks. You got Theismann, you got Rippon, and then Doug Williams are all a part of some of the great years that Joe Gibbs was able to put together in the Washington Redskins era. And one of the things that Doug said, a quick quote, he goes, I get a phone call from Coach Gibbs, and he was the only guy who called me Douglas. And he said, Douglas, it's Coach Gibbs. How are you doing? And then he asked me to come to Washington, and what a difference that he made there. So Doug Williams obviously recognized great coaching talent. He had it from Eddie Robinson. He had it from Joe Gibbs. And then later on, after his career was over, obviously coaching became an important part of his career. You want to mention some of the things that stick out to you, Vincent, in terms of his post-NFL career?
Look what he's doing with the Washington Commanders right now. I believe he's an assistant, right? I don't know his title, but think about what he's meant to Jaden Daniels, how Jaden Daniels has talked about highly of him. And then think about his coaching. He was a coach here at Morehouse for 1 year, changed their culture. Went down and coached at his alma mater, Grambling State University, won the SWAC there. But we don't hear nothing about that. But look what he's done most of all under the new ownership of the Washington Commanders. And I'm going to tell you something. You know, when people really respect you, when Dan Quinn got the head coaching job, Dan Quinn, formerly of the Atlanta Falcons, he said, one person I want in the building is the young man from Zachary, Louisiana, to be close to our football team. I'm going to call him, like you said, Mr. Harper LaBelle, Douglas Williams in the house. Sometimes we have to go through adversity, man. You never know where your life is going to change or what you're going to do, but you got to be strong out here. Problems are always happen in your life. But the true people is how you handle it. And trust me, if you really rely on the man upstairs, he's going to take care of you. That's when I look at Doug Williams, man. And I'm going to use this as my final thought, and I'll let you end it today, Hawk. That was a song by the great Bill Withers. When I was in middle school, coming out of the 9th grade to the 10th grade. One of my favorite bands, Club Nouveau, Jay King out of Sacramento, California, did the remake. Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I help you carry on. See, that's going to be the motto of 2025 for 100 yards of football with Harper LaBelle. Back to you, Harper.
Well, Doug's career ends with the Redskins in 1989. He went through the strike year, wins the Super Bowl. He's an MVP. And then what am I going to do with the rest of my life? What am I going to do now? And I think the humility that Doug had after winning the Super Bowl and really having all the ability to be able to go, hey, look at me, look what I've been able to do. Small beginnings. I think it was great that he ended up going back to the high school level. He coached at Point, Cooperey Central, Northeast High School. He went to the Naval Academy. He was there for a year. He was a assistant coach there. He went to Europe. He coached the Scottish Claymores, part of the NFL expansion that they had there. He was a head coach at Morehouse College. He went back to Grambling. He's been with the Jacksonville Jaguars, worked as a personal executive with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He was in charge of scouting and the coordinator of the pro scouting department that they had there. Back to the Redskins before they became the Commanders. He was a general manager there. He's been a senior vice president in different terms, and he's now with the Commanders as a senior advisor. So here's a guy with the exception of being an owner. He's done everything. He probably has taken out the trash a few times, but he's also been one of the executives that helps run the program, the general manager, the guy that makes sure that everything is done from getting on the plane at the right time to making sure the food and everything is available to who's on my roster and who can we help to bring in if we need to, in case somebody gets hurt, to make the roster a little bit better. So Doug Williams, certainly kudos to him. Obviously, let's look at a couple of the stats that he has. As a career, he's a Super Bowl champion in Super Bowl 22. He was the MVP of that game. He was the all-rookie team of the Pro Football Writers Association back in 1978. He's a member of the Washington Commanders 90 Greatest. He's in the Ring of Fame there. He's in the Ring of Honor in Tampa as well. He's first-team All-American back in 1977 at Grambling. He's in the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame, the D.C. Sports Hall of Fame. He's a two-time Black college national champion. 4-time he was a SWAC champion coach. 3 times he was coach of the year. How about that? He's thrown for over 16,000 yards. What else can you say about this young man except he's in the College Football Hall of Fame and maybe the Pro Football Hall of Fame someday. But Vincent, final thoughts before we move on to honor Doug Williams.
Nothing else you can say. He set the tone for the African-American quarterback playing at a high level in the National Football League. The Super Bowl, January 31st, 1988, is going to be one of the best days that I ever remember watching the great game, watching football and watching the Super Bowl. And it's a very special time to realize that they always say history always is special because there's certain parts of history that makes you say, okay, it makes you smile. It makes you have honor. And it's special. And that day in San Diego, California, Doug Williams was on fire. I don't have to say no more. Outstanding man, outstanding football player. Went to the Grambling State University, played on one of the greatest football coaches ever in this game, Eddie Robertson. It ain't much you can say, man. And the epitome and the goal is to win the Super Bowl. Whatever you want to mention Doug Williams, where he's the first African-American, or whether things didn't work out in Tampa, he's got that Super Bowl ring, and that's the class of elite. Ain't a lot of people walking around as a starting quarterback got that ring. It's only a few. Back to you, Mr. Harper LaBelle.
Yeah, his success both as a player, as a coach, as an administrator has been nothing short of excellent, and we appreciate and applaud him for that. His record as a player, he was 38, 40, 42, and 1. As a coach, he's 64 and 42 throughout his career. His kids were great athletes, has a daughter that has committed to play at the University of Southern California basketball. He's got sons and nephews and cousins that have all had great success. And he, along with James Harris, helped to co-found the Black College Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Doug on the great honors that he had. We certainly appreciate all that he's done for the game of football. He certainly made it better. So for Jeremiah Long, our producer and engineer, thank you so much, Jeremiah, for putting those pictures together. For our founder and co-host, Vincent Turner, I'm Harper LaBelle saying thank you for tuning in to another episode of 100 Yards of Football, the Legends Edition, today honoring Doug Williams. Have a fantastic day, everybody.